Hi, folks. Good to be back. How many times have you felt that you didn't want to do something in case you failed? You know, the thought, well, I can't possibly do that. It's too much for me. If I try and do it and I get it wrong, then what? I'll be finished. My reputation will be shot. But you know, the good news is this. Our God is a God of the second chance. In fact, our God is the God of another chance. Not just the second chance. He's a God of another chance. He's the God of another chance and another chance and another chance. He's the God who keeps using us if we're prepared to be used. Listen to Acts chapter 13 and verse 13. In Acts chapter 13, verse 13, it says this. From Paphos, Paul and his companions sailed to Perga in Pamphylia, where John left them and returned to Jerusalem. John left the ministry for one reason or another. We're not really sure why. Maybe it had become too much for him. Maybe he felt he couldn't go on and carry on doing these things. Maybe it was the persecution. Maybe there was some other reason. We're not told. And then in Acts chapter 15, we read about Paul and Barnabas. And Paul and Barnabas have an almighty argument. An argument about what it is that they should do next. And what it is that they should do about John, also known as Mark. Listen to this. Sometime later, Paul and Barnabas said, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we've preached the word of the Lord and see how they're doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. This is Mark chapter 15 and verses 36 and 37. John had left. And yes, he'd left the ministry, but you know, he walked away. Not that he should never come back and never serve the Lord again. But John needed encouragement. And Barnabas, whose name actually means encourager, his name wasn't Barnabas, but that was his nickname. He was an encourager, wanted to encourage John or Mark, depending on which of the phrases you want to use, or John Mark, if you like. Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. He wanted to encourage him to continue in the work of God. After all, he'd probably been at some of these places when the word had been preached. He may have even preached the word himself. We don't know. And Barnabas wanted to encourage him. But Paul, verse 38, did not think it was wise to take him, because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. Barnabas wanted to encourage John Mark, but Paul had a different opinion. An opinion that said, no, we can't take him with us. He let us down last time. He let us down. He deserted us. Strong word to use, isn't it? He deserted us and didn't continue with the work of God. Wow. Maybe that's the way you feel right now. Maybe you feel that somebody has failed you. Somebody in the church has hurt you. I've heard it many times from many a person over the years, where somebody has been hurt by somebody else in the church and they walk away and say, never again. If that's the way Christians behave, I don't want anything to do with it. It wasn't Barnabas's idea. Barnabas's idea was, let's encourage him back into the work. This is not going to be a difficult thing. We're going to the churches. We're going to see them and see how they're getting on. Let us encourage his heart as our heart will be encouraged by seeing how the believers are doing. But Paul wasn't having any of it. No, said Paul, that's not going to happen. He deserted us. And if he's left the work of God, he's left the work of God, and that's the end of it. God doesn't think like that. God doesn't think like that. Verse 39, it goes on to say this. They continued with, they had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus. Wow, just a second. They'd agreed that they were going to go back and visit the Christians. But now after this argument, because this argument was so strong, because of their positions, they went away and parted company. They no longer worked together. But you know what the good news is? They continue to work. Don't give up just because somebody's hurt you. Don't give up just because it didn't feel right. Don't give up just because in the past you failed and therefore you don't think you can do it again. Paul thought John Mark wasn't worth the effort. But Barnabas thought he was. And so they parted company and they both continued to work. Both Barnabas and Paul. Paul chose Silas and left commended by the believers in the grace of the Lord. They were both working. They weren't working side by side, but they're both working in the ministry of the gospel. Never give up just because you've had an argument. Never give up just because something seems to have gone wrong. Notice that when it talks about Barnabas, it tells us that he went to Cyprus. And who did he take with him? He took Mark. He took Mark to Cyprus, where he was able to minister again in the churches there. Don't give up. God's always got something for you to do. He's always got something for you to do. Don't hold a grudge. Paul held a grudge. He didn't think it was a good idea. He didn't think it was wise to take John. After all, he'd let him down once. He bore a grudge. He wasn't quite the same as Paul. He was different. Well, you know, the Church of God isn't all the same. We're not all alike. It would be boring if we were. There are differences between us and we might have disagreements. But don't give up and don't hold grudges. And dare to fail. Take on a job. Do the job. Work at it. Do your best. And if you fail, you fail. But fail after giving your best. And then it reads on. It says that Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. You see, John could have been left behind. Barnabas and Paul could have left the ministry. But no. That Barnabas and Paul continued. And Mark and Silas joined the fight. The battle for lives. The war has been won when Jesus died on the cross. He gave his life for you and for me. But he needs foot soldiers. And you and I are the foot soldiers. And foot soldiers sometimes get hurt or die. But without the foot soldiers, the message of victory does not go forward. We are on the victory side. We are on the winning side. Christ has already won the battle on Calvary's cross. Trust him for it and work for his glory. Amen.